The Democratic Republic of Congo has taken a significant step toward ending its long-running conflict with the M23 rebel group after both sides signed a new framework peace deal in Doha, Qatar. The agreement follows months of mediation driven by Qatar officials and the United States as violence and displacements continue to rise in the east. Although the deal offers a path toward a ceasefire, clashes have persisted, with M23 and other armed groups still active in North Kivu and South Kivu. The framework is meant to guide the next stage of talks, but the situation on ground remains fragile. And so at this time, I'm joined on the conversation by Patrick Kadima, a lecturer at Wits University, Johannesburg. Thank you so much, Patrick, for coming around.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. And I also have Alexander von Rugen, family of the house, or a friend of the house, I must say, a global policy analyst, joins me from Ontario in Canada. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I start with Patrick right now. So why has it remained so difficult to actually put an end to the M23-led conflict up until now, especially as clashes continue even in the middle of peace negotiations?
Thank you, and good evening, and good evening to your viewers. So I'm of the view that the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is just not a conflict that should be associated with the country. It's a conflict that should be, it's an international conflict because there are various role players that involved in the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, be it state actors or non-state actors. And so, the complexity of the conflict that is taking place in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo requires all parties that are involved in the conflict to sit on the table and try iron out issues. But this has not been the case because we have seen, for example, countries such as Rwanda, which are involved in the conflict, denying that that they're not involved in the conflict. The M23 have made demands, and the Congolese government itself as well as made demands, and those demands, and between these parties, it has been difficult to find a common point for them to meet. So the nature of the conflict is such that it is complex, and that is the reason why the conflict continues to go on despite peace processes being signed in Washington and in Doha.
Okay, so I like the fact that you mentioned the fact that there are so many people, or should I say entities, who have vested interests in this situation in the DRC. So I'm just going to put that question to Alexander. What makes DRC such a cynosure? Why is it a center of attraction? What is it that people want with this particular region that makes it impossible for it to experience peace?
Well, I think Baron Rothschild coined the phrase the best: the time to make money is when there's blood in the streets, even if the blood is your own. And I think people have, through greed, through tribal disputes and chaos, are trying to take advantage of that. Now, if we go to the root problems that exist here, we have to look at the imposition of the former colonial rules that created the disputes between the Hutus and the Tutsis. The Tutsis were typically farmers, herders, and the Hutus were farmers. When the Belgians came in, they created a secular divide between them, favoring the Tutsis for administration roles and education. And when Rwanda got its independence, those conflicts were disputed and emerged and created a situation of civil war, which lasted for many, many years, leading up to a genocide in 1994. Those issues aren't going to go away when you have people walking the land that lost relatives, parents, brothers, sisters in that genocide. that those feelings of anger don't go away. And you've got to look at that as one of the underlying problems here, and how to solve the problem that can pacify both sides. That's why we call it complex. But let's not just call it complex. Let's look at the root cause of the problems. The other thing is you've got a fight for control of the DRC right now. You have internal management problems. The government is not looking after its people. There's starvation. There's been mismanagement of foreign entities coming in and taking advantage of the DRC workers. The recent mine collapse last week is a prime example of that. You've got Joseph Kabila, who's been sentenced to death, the former president, reemerging as a possible instigator behind M23's motives to move further into the country. All of these complex problems are working together, so they have to be taken into consideration as to how we format a solution.
Okay, so Patrick, we're looking at tribal tensions, deplorable state of the people, most especially those who are actually living below the standard as necessary, and that gave birth to the different armed groups that we see navigate through the course of that particular region. Of course, gave birth to the birth of M23. Now, particularly M23's offensive has led to the rapid capture of Goma, North Kivu's largest city, and we've also seen parts of their onslaught in South Kivu. So in light of the ongoing talks, does this group, that actually harbors other groups, does this particular group have any legitimate grounds for its continued attacks?
Which particular group? The M23?
M23 particularly.
No, look, first of all, M23 does not have any legitimacy on, to continue the conflict or to continue their onslaught in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's not only the M23, it's the state of Rwanda that continues to back them up, that needs to also be cautioned or mentioned out, because they're the ones backing the M23. Look, the Congo is it's a very large country. It's very complex. My colleague has touched on, Alexandra, I think, has touched on the various issues that, are going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And those are the root causes that need to be dealt with, right? But for it to be dealt with, then you need to, have parties that want to sit down and negotiate, right? And if you have a militia group or a rebel group that is trying to destabilize the country, and does not want to negotiate, then it becomes problematic. But we should never, and I'm a believer that we should never allow or give legitimacy to these rebel groups that they have a case to continue fighting and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, it's the lives of women and children that are lost in this conflict. The other issue I wanted to probably also maybe bring up is I did hear my colleague here saying that it's the government of the day that also does not take care of the people and so on and so forth. I think we are too harsh on the Tshisekedi administration. For more than 2 decades, the Congo has not had a proper administration working day in and day out. And we are seeing some movements in terms of foreign policy from the Tshisekedi government, diplomatic relations being grown, participation on the global stage, an administration that's trying to sort out internal issues. And obviously, they're not going to solve it within their term, whether it's, both terms that they have. These are advancements that the administration has tried, despite the conflict and the internal issues that are happening, and internal destabilization that is happening. They are trying to sort out these issues, and it will take years to solve the Congo issue. And I think that we should at least be grateful, or should appreciate at least, that the current administration is working to find a solution to these issues that, and they're not perfect. And to be honest, they're not perfect. They must be criticized where they fail. But I think, given the context of the Democratic Republic Republic of Congo. They have outperformed the Kabila administration. They've outperformed, the previous administration before Kabila, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so Alexander, we'll just continue from that line. Do you think that President Felix Tshisekedi has actually done well in managing the conflict with these rebel groups, most especially as we've seen the West weighed in, we've seen other foreign partners like Qatar also try to midwife the peace talks, which he actually was part of those who keyed into that particular initiative to see it come to light. Would you say that he's doing all that he can to put an end to the fight with the rebel groups in his jurisdiction?
I don't know if he's capable. Other African countries have come to the table to help negotiate a peace. Angola, South Africa, Kenya, which has also been critical of hosting Joseph Kabila, and who's now, by the way, sentenced to death by his government in the DRC for coercive activities against the state. The movement of M23 in capturing Goma and other cities in the east have put extra pressure on the government to, I think, realize the dire situation they're in. Is Rwanda the sponsor of this? I think it's pretty obvious they are. I think we also have to look at who's being sanctioned here. Who are the shot callers, basically? Who are the catalysts to this driving force? And if you look at the U.S. sanction list, you see a name, former General James Karabi, who was a chief strategist in the area. He helped Museveni gain power in 1986 in Uganda. He also led the troops in Rwanda in 94 in ousting the Houthis and taking control of Rwanda. And he helped in 97 in the DRC to get Laurent Kabila, Joseph's father, as head of the country. He was subsequently assassinated in 2001, and that's when Joseph took power till 2019. So that individual is sanctioned. I would say U.S. intelligence knows more about this than I do, but there's a good reason for that sanctioning. Also, it's been a catalyst to a peace talk in Qatar, with the U.S. also sponsoring. So it's a framework right now. The framework is going to start with a ceasefire. That's how wars end. Start with a ceasefire, start with a prisoner exchange, and now let's look at the underlying conditions for a sustained peace, which are going to be cultural. They're going to be monetary as well, because the east side of the DRC is rich in mines and is producing essential minerals for the West, which is also looking at this. Call it avarice, call it greed. I think what Trump wants to do is, again, stop giving aid and start doing trade. So everyone's going to be after the minerals. Now, how that money is going to be managed is what's going to determine whether the peace gets upheld or not. There's going to have to be reconciliation to the victims of the genocide. That memory is not going away unless there's some payment made for the past wrongdoings, some compensation to the survivors. That'll all have to be part of the plan. And that's where it becomes complex. Like, what is fair? Who gets what? Who gets to govern afterwards? Who runs the resources? And of course, the disbursement of those monies. Are they going to fill a politician's pockets, or are they actually going to go to the people? And that's the only way you're going to sustain a peace.
So I think that is the point that we've not really talked about up until now. Patrick, who gets to manage the resources and who gets to benefit more? Now, some observers have argued that the real fight between the DRC government and the M23 rebels has to do with the control of the region's vast mineral wealth. Now, if we were to lay the facts on the table, Patrick. Is that actually the problem? And that is why we've not seen a long-lasting peace come to the DRC.
I'll be very short with this. The M23 cannot try to ascertain any power or any role that is, the role of the state. So when it comes to reparations, when it comes to managing the state, when it comes to leading the state, it should be done through the government of the day. And that government is the government of the Tshisekedi administration. So we should never open space for the M23 and the rebels to have a say on how to run the state or have a say in how things will be shared. That should be the role of the state. That should be the role of the peace mediators that are seized with the matter, such as the Doha process and the Western process.
Okay, so Alexander, yes, M23 holds several mining zones. Part of the things you mentioned in passing, particularly coltan-rich areas, of course, in the region, and finances itself through local taxation, according to reports that we understand. So we understand that though Rwanda has denied, it seems to be part of those sponsoring the expedition of the M23 rebels, maybe the West too. It's not for me to say. But then, can this continue, having to negotiate with the M23 rebel to actually manage the resources that government should actually be fully in charge of?
Well, they should. There has to be a governing body that does licensing, and it goes much deeper than that. It goes to the protection of the workers in the mines. Giving them rights, making sure that their living conditions are proper, that they're not so impoverished with low payment that their living conditions are deplorable. That all has to be part of the solution here, because that's what creates the depression, which creates the uprising. Child labor, again, another issue, has to be condemned and stopped. Now, the West are the buyers. They're getting fed by these resources. They have to lay the rules. They have to put in sanctions, which hopefully will act as a catalyst to change and prosperity for the region. The bad actors that are in there now, I believe the Chinese are running mines that have deplorable conditions, and worker safety is being ignored. That all has to change. So here's an opportunity for the world to look at it and put conditions down, saying, hey, we want to trade with you, but we need to know you're treating your people fairly and properly. Now, that might mean an increase in the cost of the commodity. Africa is known for discounting its resources because it can't access the markets unless they deal through trading firms that tend to line their pockets first. I think that there's got to be an equilibrium established here, and that is fair for all. And it's got to be a little more transparent than what it currently is.
As we see, there seems to be a lot of underlying factors fueling the conflict in the DRC. And just as Alexander said, there's got to be some sort of equilibrium in terms of these agreements being reached, the modalities, or should I say the conditions for the peace deal being signed between the DRC and the rebel group. But the question would always be, who would benefit more, unless there are still other issues that are not privy to public knowledge as regards maybe this rebel group actually even would want to weaken the presidency, or should I say the regime of Felix Tshisekedi, to have total control of the region and its resources. But then we'll go on a break and return to look at it from this angle and look at other angles to these issues also, and find if there could be some way out, most especially as it affects the death and the destruction of people and property in the DRC. To stay with us, we'll be back. On the conversation, we have been talking about the seemingly concrete progress being made between the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels. We understand that a peace deal, or should I say a peace framework has been signed between both entities, and it's been midwifed by Qatar anyway, and the hope is that this would eventually put an end to the conflict that has ravaged the country for a couple of years now. And I've been talking to Patrick Kadima, a lecturer at Wits University in Johannesburg, and of course Alexander von Rugen, a global policy analyst, to help us understand if this is actually what is necessary to put an end to the fights that we've seen in the DRC. So, Patrick, let me come to you now, and I'd like you to just do a holistic analysis of the conflict between the rebel group and the government. Is there a hidden, maybe, political agenda behind M23's actions aimed at weakening President Felix Tshisekedi's administration and positioning the group as a national influence? Because we see a peace deal being signed, but then we still see attacks. Some villages are still currently being attacked. And one would have thought that whatever fights that have been happening during the course of this conversation or discussion would halt these fights.
No, it won't. It won't. Those discussions, in fact, won't. The Doha process won't halt these fights, because the M23 are being used by the Rwandan government to destabilize the Tshisekedi administration. And that's the whole point, right? The whole point is destabilize the Tshisekedi administration so that they are not able to govern the country, and that they are seen in a negative way. Because there is no way that when talks are in the process, a rebel group continues to hurt civilians and in particular women and children. So they are being used. Their aim is to destabilize the Tshisekedi government. But particularly the international community is to be blamed, because they've not taken enough action towards Rwanda. Yes, the European Union has taken some action. Certain countries such as Canada, Belgium, and the UK have taken some actions to place certain forms of sanction towards the Rwandan government. And it's not my opinion. This is UN-backed evidence. This is evidence backed up by civil society, evidence backed by academics, right? That Rwanda is involved in supporting the M23, no matter how they deny that. And there is evidence even through investigative journalism that the Rwandese have been supporting the M23. So I think the international community has not responded. SADC as well, tried its best. They went there through a military intervention. Unfortunately for them, that military intervention was short-lived, because of various factors. And now we have the EAC SADC process taking place, which has also, I think, stalled a bit, because first of all, SADC does not have a chairperson. I mean, of recent, maybe of last week or 2 weeks back, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa was elected into there because the current chairperson fled his own country. So I would not expect the talks to have continued without a SADC chairperson. Now that President Ramaphosa has taken over, I do expect to see a movement in terms of both regions trying to find the solution. I noted as well on this past weekend that the 5 advisors, or the 5 former presidents chosen by SADC and EAC were in the Democratic Republic of Congo this weekend when there was a meeting of the international Great Lakes region happening in Kinshasa. So I do think that in a nutshell, that M23's objective is to destabilize the Tshisekedi administration, no matter what process or peace processes are going on in Doha or Washington.
Now, Alexander, after pushing into South Kivu and capturing Bukavu in February this year, M23's external support remains unclear. Rwanda keeps denying, involvement. At some point, we heard it was Uganda, and there are probably some Western actors, that seem to be fueling or continuously fueling these conflicts are being spearheaded by the M23 rebel. Why is it hard in identifying the groups, persons, or entities that are truly sponsoring the M23's onslaught?
Well, the perpetrators all want to have a retained plausible deniability. They're benefiting because where are these resources going? I mean, it's real easy. Just follow the money. Rwanda is shipping resources that they aren't mining. Uganda is doing the same thing. Some of them might flow through Kenya and Tanzania because they have port cities in Mombasa and Dar es Salaam. They're not landlocked as Uganda is. So I think there's a case of many traders in East Africa working in collusion with one another that are adding to this conflict. It's about money. Now, if we look at the motives of M23, it was originally to repatriate Tutsi refugees and keep pressure in destabilizing the government of the DRC. If that acts as a catalyst to peace, then the destabilization is a way of achieving that peace. That's not an unusual situation. It happens in many countries where there's rebel groups. Keep in mind, we're calling them rebels. One man's rebel is another man's freedom fighter. It all depends what side of the fence you're sitting on.
Okay, so Patrick, a while ago you actually mentioned that there was a UN report that heavily accused Rwanda of being part of those benefiting, if not majorly benefiting from mineral smuggling in M23 controlled areas, and might so be the one supporting M23's actions in the DRC. Well, Rwanda has continuously denied these particular accusations, yet it remains heavily involved in the peace process. Why does Kigali retain such a central role, even in the peace talks, but then would deny that it has nothing to do with the instability in the DRC?
It's in the nature of any criminal or most criminals to deny their acts, right? They will deny, and that's the question that we've been asking. Why deny that you're involved? But in the Washington process, you are there signing peace agreements to say, yes, we are willing to make peace. So, evidence has been there. It's not my evidence, it's evidence backed by people that have been working on this conflict for years. And I think they're trying to, their denial is on the basis that if they do accept that they were involved, then obviously the international community will look towards them in a different eye. But at the end of the day, being in the peace process in Washington signifies that they are part and parcel of the conflict. They are, materials, military equipments have been found to be used by the M23, by investigative journalists. So they are part and parcel, whether they deny or not. There is evidence to that effect, and that's why they are in Washington trying to sign a peace deal.
Okay, so Alex, now the DRC government has, long accused M23 of announcing false ceasefires, even as we've seen fights resume in some parts of the country. So then, looking at this latest peace agreement being signed by the government and the M23 rebels, can the latest peace, agreement, can it achieve some sort of a truce, a long-lasting truce at this particular time, compared to the ones that we've seen been agreed to before?
Compared to the past, I would say yes. Keep in mind, you've now got more broad-based international attention on this. America's getting involved. Doha, the Qataris seem to be they want a reputation of being the global peacekeepers, being in the Middle East. They want to be the center of negotiation for peace. Trump wants peace too. I mean, he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, so he'd like to take credit wherever he can, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want peace here. He's also after minerals. He wants to cut a deal with the DRC if that's the catalyst to creating that peace, and also a renewed economic investment in Africa. You got to remember the aid to Africa has been cut off. The UN is being defunded. U.S. aid has been canceled. The NGOs aren't getting any money. For Africa to stand on its own, it's got to show it can govern itself and keep the peace with itself in dealing with these matters. Whether or not the history goes back to colonial times, and we can all point the finger as to where the root cause was, that is then. This is now. We have to move forward. We have to be progressively. We've got to stop the institutionalized corruption, because that's what holds up these solutions. And this is where the average citizen suffers, because the shot callers, the ones in control, are more geared to coming up with a solution as to how much money they can make on whatever solution is achieved. And that is the catalyst to delay. Now you've got pressure coming in from international groups. I think this is a good sign. Can this result in sustained peace? I think it's probably closer than ever before. Will there be tensions? Will there be uprising? Will there be violations of a ceasefire? Yes, absolutely. You've got too many. When you have tribal conflicts that have been around for 40, 50 years, you're never going to stop that. But what you can do is try to contain it by offering solutions that reward the peace more so than rewards conflict.
Yeah, Alexander, I'd like to quickly clarify something. You said that there's a need to put an end to institutionalized corruption. Corruption on the part of who? And who would you expect that would stop the corruption?
Well, who makes money from conflict? You've got arms dealers. You've got politicians. You've got military people. The spectrum of guilty parties is vast. Okay, even in the surrounding countries, they make money because of illicit trade. The traders in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda are all benefiting from this. So the longer the conflict takes place and the longer it can be unregulated, the more certain groups retain power and make money off of it.
Okay, so Patrick, now, Patrick, there are a lot of people who have vested interest in what's happening in the DRC, and I quickly want to cast our mind back rather to 2009, where a truce was called and fighters were meant to be integrated into the national army. Then later on, we now still saw the M23 rebel resurface, claiming the government failed to uphold the deal. Now, do you actually think that all these people interested in the so-called peace returning to the DRC can actually be trusted to honor these new agreements?
No. Not every non-state actor can be trusted. Even state actors that are involved in this conflict can be trusted in terms of ensuring that peace prevails in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's why the international community, that's why regional organizations need to be involved as a whole, because certain neighbors are invested in the destabilization of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And they are well known, they are well-known neighbors that we know. They are not vested in the peace of the Democratic Republic of Congo for one reason or another. And that's why the international community needs to be involved. And that's why we must commend, for better or for worse, what Donald Trump has tried to do in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have never seen in years, compared even to the Pretoria Accords, how fast they have tried to push this. Both ministers of foreign affairs were in Washington. They met Trump. They signed the deals and so on and so forth. Now the heads of state have to iron out certain issues and go meet Trump. That is in the pipeline. The Doha process as well. We must, commend Doha for taking, a stance to try and solve, the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that is showing, they are moving. There are tensions, but they are moving forward with the process to ensure that peace can prevail in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Something the African Union, which is the custodian of this continent, has failed to do. Something that look, SADC has failed to do in the East African community, and now, both regional groups or sub-regional economic communities have now joined hands trying to find a solution to the issue emerging the Luanda and Nairobi processes, which was also a very big blunder, because I don't think it's ever going to work, this SADC-EAC process. It's just going to be a talk shop, and both regions are going to have to collapse their...
Hello, Patrick. Okay, so I think we just lost communication with Patrick there. We'll try to see if we can bring him back on as we coast-home on the course that we are on. That's looking at the latest peace deal being signed between the DRC and the M23 rebel. But then, Alexander, let's look at this. M23 has suffered losses in time past, including deadly bombings and attacks at a Bukavu rally and some other places that has killed some of their members, so to speak, and injured some of them, many of them, according to reports anyway. Some people have said that there's a lot that goes into such peace deals. Patrick, a while ago talked about not even knowing if there will be reparations, even along these peace talks. And there have been questions as to how long-lasting these particular peace agreements would be, or probably lead to, by the time it's eventually finalized. Now, the question has always been, should there be some sort of a military action, a military pressure, so to speak, to decisively, drastically, and totally put an end to armed conflicts? Because even these M23 rebels are refused to disarm in previous talks. Or would you still say more dialogue, more rooms for dialogue should be entertained?
Well, the reason for non-disarmament is lack of trust. I'm not going to lay down my weapons if I feel there's still a threat against myself, my family, my government. So I'm going to hold on to my rifle, and hopefully I won't have to use it. To have a constant military presence, that's been known in the world not to work. I mean, let's look at another situation in Europe, in North Ireland. They had a conflict for 80 years. It was sectoral. It was Catholic against Protestant, both Christian, but two different sects of the same religion. They were fighting each other. They were bombing each other. One of them had more control and over the other, and the British had a presence of military because of the killings. How did they solve the problem? They made a peace accord where they agreed to remove the military in an orderly fashion, and they invited investment into the country. They built factories. They created jobs. So now the same terrorists or freedom fighters, again, whichever you want to call them, were in the same factory, eating lunch in the same cafeteria, but not shooting each other because they were both making money to support their families. They had health care. Okay. Africa has much to work on infrastructure, especially in the DRC. I would say you've got to work on health care for the individuals, working conditions, and humanitarian support for the starving. You can give a family a fish and you feed them for a day. If you teach them how to go fishing and give them a boat and a reel, you can feed them for life. So that going away from aid, which actually perpetuates a problem, as opposed to a solution to that problem in educating and supporting the locals to support themselves, I think is all got to be part of the solution. Otherwise, you're just going to perpetuate the conflict. Because when somebody has nothing to lose, it's easy to pick up a gun and blame everyone else and sustain yourself through a conflict.
Okay, so talking about solutions, Alexander, let's look at the new peace framework that's actually built on 8 protocols. Part of it has to do with a ceasefire, very important, prisoner exchanges, if possible, humanitarian access, and restoring state authority. Now, can these be achieved?
Well, always under, but progressively. I think if the militants see progress, they're more apt to cooperate. They're saying, okay, this is moving, this is trending in the direction that we fought for. It's going to be, we're going to crawl before we walk, and we're going to walk before we run. But as long as we're still going in the same direction, that's progress. Okay, and sometimes you got to take 3 steps forward and 1 step back, but the net result is you still move forward. This is what we're going to be dealing with here. Again, I'm going to relate back to the tribal issues between the Hutus and the Tutsis. That's one issue. The greed of all of those surrounding this conflict and the beneficiaries of this conflict, those are the ones we've got to silence and kind of kick out of the business, and then be able to move forward towards a sustainable peace, which also means sustainable environment for the people. So they focus on the outside of conflict.
Okay, so let's end with this. Now, the deal also looks at, governance reforms, national power sharing. I don't even know how possible that would be with, an armed group, and the disarmament and reintegration of the same M23 rebel group. And now, in just about 30 seconds, I'd like to get your reaction. How realistic are these demands in terms of implementation?
Well, I think you're going to have a hybrid approach. You've got, again, tribal representation that has to live in harmony together. So they're going to want to know that there's a balance there, that no one secular group is being favored over another. All right, that's normal. And again, a sustainable peace is only if the people are reasonably happy and satisfied that they're moving in the right direction. Increased healthcare, increased education for the kids, elimination of child labor, housing, all of the above, which is a monumental task, but it means taking the money from those resources.
All right, thank you so much, Alexander von Rugen, Global Policy Analyst. It was nice talking to you. And of course, Patrick Kadima, lecturer at Wits University, Johannesburg. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.
Of course.